Good morning. So today I'm going to show you how to make focaccia, which is an Italian bread. And if you've seen the recipe sheet, we're going to decorate this with lots of herbs and vegetables. So this recipe takes quite a long time to make, and it's something that we don't unfortunately have time to do in lessons at school. So I thought we'd give it a go today. And the reason why it takes so long to take is because you need to leave the bread to prove, which basically means leaving it to rest to let the yeast do its magic and double the bread in size. And what that's actually going to do is just put lots of lovely air into your bread. So what I'm going to do first of all is just run through the equipment, and hopefully I'll remember everything today. So I'll move the camera down and I'll show you what I've got. Okay, so first of all you can see I've got a baking tray with a piece of baking paper on it. You don't need the baking paper if your tray is nice and new and lovely. You can just spread some olive oil on that, but my baking tray is a little old. It's been well used, so I'm going to pop some baking paper on it rather than cook directly on top of that. I've also got a tea towel which I need to cover my bread with while it's proving. I've then got either a spatula or something to scrape the edge of your bowl when you're getting the dough out of it. So if you haven't got any of these, then you just have to try and use a knife just to get all of the bread dough mix out of the bowl. I've also got a tablespoon, so that's the big one, the one that's bigger than the spoon that you'd eat your dessert with. And I've got my lovely mixing bowl. Okay, so those are the equipment that you will need. I'll put those over to one side and we'll go through the ingredients. So I've got 500 grams of strong bread flour. You will need a little extra just to pop on your work surface while you're kneading the dough. Then we've also got 400 ml of lukewarm water. And we're not going to add this all at once, just gradually. So you might not need all of this water. It does depend very much on your flour. I've also got 7 grams of instant yeast, so easy bake yeast, and that just means that you can pop it straight into the flour without having to soak it in water first. And I've got 2 teaspoons, so those are the small spoons that you'd stir your cup of tea with, of salt. The final ingredient I've got is 5 tablespoons of olive oil that I've just popped in a cup there. Okay, so we should now be ready to bake. So what we're going to do first is make the bread, and then I'll show you the toppings that I've got, because I've been able to get a variety of herbs and vegetables to use, but you can use anything that you've got in your fridge that's going to cook within 20 minutes again. So avoid your carrots, your potatoes, things like that, obviously that take a bit longer, but mushrooms, sweet corn, peppers, spring onions, cherry tomatoes, olives, herbs and spices, and chilies, they're always good on there. Lemons, so I'm going to use a variety of those to show you what you can do with it. So let's bake. Okay, so we're going to now make the bread base. So I'm going to move the camera down, you can see what I'm doing. First thing I'm going to do though is put my flour into my mixing bowl, and then I'm going to put my salt on one side of the bowl and my yeast on the other. And this stops the salt from killing the yeast in that initial mixing process. And then I'm going to add my 2 tablespoons, not all of the olive oil, just 2 tablespoons of the olive oil, and then add the water gradually. I'm going to stir it initially using a knife. You can use the spoon that's in the olive oil if you prefer, or you can just simply use your hands. It just depends what your preference is. So I'll move the camera down, you'll see what I can do. Okay, so hopefully you can see everything there. Just going to make it so you can see my big mixing bowl. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to put my flour into my mixing bowl. There's no need to sieve it. And I'm going to use this bowl to prove my bread in afterwards. So then I'm going to pop my salt on one side, stuck to my dish there, and my yeast on the other side. Okay. I'm going to get my olive oil, just make a little well in the centre. And I'm going to pop my 2 tablespoons, make sure they are full tablespoons. I'm going to pop just a little bit extra in there because my first one wasn't quite as good as it should be. Okay. And I'm going to pop round about 200 millilitres of water in this. Okay, so that's about 150. I've just literally, actually I'm going to put around about 150 in to start with. And then I'm just going to mix that up with the knife. Okay, and this just stops your hands getting really sticky and gluey in that initial wet stage of the bread. Now I can see that this is coming together, but it is quite dry still, so I'm going to add some extra water. Add it to the bottom of your bowl. Okay, I'm just going to put in about 50 ml, so I've put 200 in at this point. Okay, mix that again. Try not to flick it everywhere like I've just done. Okay, and this is now binding together a bit better. So I'm going to start using my hands now because I can actually feel then how wet the mixture is. And I'm just going to pick it up and just turn it over while scraping the side of the bowl. Now, I'm trying to get all of those bits combined, and I can see and feel that it needs a little extra water, but not too much. And as I say, it will depend on what flour you're using as to how much water you need. So I want to incorporate all of these little bits that are in the bottom here. So I'm going to move them into the centre, lift up my dough. I'm going to pop a little bit of water, so only probably about 20 ml, and I'm going to press that down with my knuckles and then turn it around. Now, I've purposely put a little bit too much water in here so I can show you what to do if you do it. And you can see and hear that this is very, very wet. Okay. So it's really simple. All you do is add a little bit more flour. So I'm going to get my flour and just pop some on and some underneath. Okay. And just give that a little mix around in the bowl. And what I'm doing is with my knuckles, I'm pressing it down and turning it and then giving it a half turn. And this is a form of kneading. Now I might not want to incorporate all of that flour that I've put in. I can feel now that my dough is much better, but I'm not going to continue and incorporate that flour in there because that would be too much. Next thing I'm going to do is just pop some flour on the desk. Okay, not too much. And put my dough on it. And I'm going to get rid of this mixing bowl. Now what you want to do now is knead the dough, and kneading is a form of stretching and folding and turning halfway, and you can do that with one hand or two hands, it doesn't matter. If your dough is too wet, again just put a little bit of flour on the desk because you don't want it to stick, but roll it around and incorporate that flour that you've already put there. You want it to be a little sticky, and as you knead it, it will become less sticky as the ingredients combine. So I hope you can see what I'm doing there. I'm just stretching and folding. Okay, if your hands are quite sticky, pop some flour on them, pick off all the bits. Okay, pop a little flour on your desk if you want, and then just pop your hand in it. Okay, move that over that way a little bit. And you need to do this for about 5 to 10 minutes. The longer the better, okay? The better the bread will be. And what you're actually doing here is creating all those lovely strands, the structure, which is the gluten strands in the bread, that when it cooks is going to capture all of the gases that the yeast will give off and create a lovely fluffy bread. If you don't do this kneading process, your bread is going to be very dense and very flat. So I'm going to knead this for about 5-10 minutes, and I shall see you when it's done. Okay, so your bread dough, after you have kneaded it for 10 minutes, try and make it into a ball like this, okay? And careful because it will stick to the desk if you haven't floured it. And then grab your bowl. You can use the mixing bowl that you've just used if you've only got the one, but you know, just give it a little brush out. Don't worry if there's a bit of flour in there, because you do need to flour the bowl, because obviously it will stick a little bit. And just flour your bread, okay? Especially on the bottom part, because you don't want it sticking to that bowl. So I've just literally just floured my bread like this, bit of flour from the desk onto the bottom, okay, and I put a little bit of flour in my bowl, and I'm going to pop that in that bowl like that. I'm going to cover that with a tea towel, and I'm going to leave it for an hour now to prove, and it should double in size. So you need it somewhere warm, away from a draft. It is quite warm at the moment, so it will be perfectly okay just on the side somewhere. But if you've got a window open and it's a bit drafty, then just keep it away from the window. So where's my tea towel? Here we go. So I'm going to just cover that and just sit it on top of my cooker there. Because it's on top of the cooker, I'm actually going to switch the cooker off, okay, at the wall, because what you don't want to do is knock your hob and then set fire to this tea towel if you are putting it on top of the cooker. If you've got a gas one, obviously you don't have to worry about that, but with an electric one, it's really important you do that. Right, I'm just going to have a little brush down here, and what we'll do is we'll go through the vegetables and what we're going to do with those. If you bear with me, your scraper tool that you've got is very handy for cleaning your desk. Okay, you can use your spatula, as I say. Okay, and then just give it a little wipe down with an antibacterial wipe, like that. Okay, I can feel some bread dough on the counter here, but I'll give it a good wipe down afterwards. Right, so obviously you do need a chopping board and a chopping knife. So you might need a large knife and also a small one, depending on what you are chopping. Okay, I'm going to show you what my ingredients are now for the toppings. Okay, I'll run through them. Now I'm lucky enough to have quite a lot of ingredients because we grow quite a lot of our vegetables and herbs in the garden. So what I've got here are some chives, but you could use spring onions if you wanted the long stalks of the flowers on your picture. I've also got some rosemary, okay, and I've got some thyme. So those are my herbs that I'm going to put on. I've got a shallot that we grew, and I'm going to slice this lengthways, so I've got kind of like the inner side of the shallot, but I'll show you that in a minute. I've got a lemon, I've got a red and an orange pepper, a couple of mushrooms, you can see on the plate there, and some cherry tomatoes, and I've also got some chilies, a green and red chilli, and some leftover olives that I was eating yesterday. So this is a great dish to use up leftovers. So if you've got half a pepper in your fridge, or, you know, a bit of courgette or some spring onions, you can just use anything you like on there. Right, so first thing I'm going to do with the small knife, I'm going to just chop the olives in half, and you've got to decide which way round you want them. Do you want this sort of face to be showing on top of your focaccia, or do you want the lengthways cut? Okay, so this actually would work very well as leaves coming up a stalk because they're kind of that shape. So you've got to be a bit creative here and think, okay, how am I going to actually have these fruits and vegetables in my focaccia? So using the bridge hold here, making sure your fingers are out of the way because it's a small, they're quite slippier olives, so be careful. And then I'm going to use my chestnut mushroom, and I'm going to hold this with a claw hold and just slice. And I kind of want, my knife could be sharper, I have to admit, I kind of want that shape. Okay, so I'm going to be picking out those bits. Might be easier to do it this way round, very gently through the stalk. Okay, so just as long as you're holding the fruits and vegetables safely, whichever method you prefer is absolutely fine. The cherry tomatoes I'm just going to cut in half, and I might just use those like this way up, possibly for, I don't know, some kind of flower. But let's cut one this way and see whether it looks better on the bread. Okay, because you could actually just push it into the bread and use it that way, and you get a lot more texture that way. Okay, so I'm going to do maybe some that way round. Okay, I think they look a bit prettier. Okay, so I've got my tomatoes cut. My herbs I'm going to leave as they are. I'm going to do my lemon. So I'm going to do some slices of lemon, and I'm going to use, I might actually use the big knife for this one, a slice of lemon for like a sunshine in the corner. So I just need the one slice. So I'm going to pop that away. and wrap it up later. Right, I'm going to do the shallot last because it might make me cry. So yellow pepper. I'm actually going to pair maybe the orange pepper rather with the lemon, and therefore I want sort of like sun strokes, sun things coming out. Sun rays is the word I'm actually looking for. So I'm going to cut that in half, and I'm going to cut slices off like this. Okay. If you've got any of the middle of the pepper there like that, you can just cut that out if you don't want it. There we go. I think that was probably a bit thick, so let's bridge hold that and cut that in half. So I've got a number of sort of pepper slices to put around the sun. They might be a bit big, so you can trim them if you want, but it's quite nice just to have it more natural looking. Okay, so I'm going to keep that pepper because I'm going to make paella later tonight for tea. So, as you know, if you've watched my video, paella uses all sorts of leftover vegetables as well. With the red pepper, I'm actually going to try and get this kind of shape and use them for the tops of flowers on top of the chives maybe. So I'm going to cut a few there like that, and I'm going to put the rest away for my paella. Put that on another plate. Okay, so I've got my red pepper. Okay, I might use maybe an olive or something in the centre, and then the rest for leaves. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do yet. Put these bits away. I'll use that in the paella as well. Okay, so the shallot. I'm going to trim both ends, and this is a banana shallot, and then I'm going to cut it. Now, you might find it easier to cut it that way or that way. I prefer it this way, even though it's a rocky edge, because the base is very small and it could slip. So I'm going to cut it in half that way. And what I want to try and do is use this bit here, okay? But I'm going to slice off very carefully the rounded bit, because I might use that somewhere else. And also it will lay flat. So bridge hold, nice sharp knife, cut down. So you just want them to lay flat. And maybe they could be sort of like, you could look at them and think, oh, they're maybe like a little kind of flower like that with the stem just coming down here. Okay. You could also then, for a bit of extra colour, put the red bit in the centre. Okay. So pop those on there. So the next thing to do is the chilli. Okay, so take my chilli. Now, if you've got leftover chilli, if you pop them in a little bag like this, or even a little Tupperware box, you can freeze them. And then when you come to use them again, if you just grate them against your cheese grater, you can use however much you want and then pop it back in the bag and pop it back in the freezer. So I'm going to cut some chilli rounds using the claw hold. And I'm just going to dot these. Chilli is sometimes quite hard to cut through, a bit like tomatoes, so you just have to be patient and a very light pressure to cut them. Okay, so I'm only going to put a few. I don't want it too spicy. My husband doesn't like spicy food, so I'll put these just down at one side for the bit that I will eat. And then I'll pop these back in the bag and pop these in my freezer. Okay, right, pop those back on the plate. So we've got our herbs, we've got all our vegetables. So what you need to be doing now, whilst your bread is proving, and you can either do this just by laying them out on a board. If you lay it out on the chopping board, you can see where you actually want your fruits and vegetables to go in terms of your focaccia bread, because the tray is a very similar size. So if you haven't got a tray that's a similar size, just do it on the desk, or you can even draw it on paper. So I know I'm going to have my sun up in this corner, and I'm going to put my peppers like this. Okay, out and around. It doesn't have to be exact, because obviously you're going to be transferring this onto your bread. And it's just to show you what you could do and how you could use the pieces. Okay, I'm going to have, I might need to cut this a bit smaller. Again, any chives and things like that I'm not going to use, I would put in the freezer. So I'm going to pop my red pepper here, and I'm going to have another smaller one maybe here with the smaller piece, and I'm going to pop my 2 olives in the centre, okay, as best you can. All right, I'm going to put some nice thyme just growing at the bottom, bit of rosemary here, okay, and then probably I've got to try and fit one of these shallots in. They're quite large, aren't they? So I'm just going to do quite a small one here and put one of the shallots like this. But you might want to do it just more up this way, okay? You can always overlap things. And then your cherry tomatoes, I'm actually going to just pop here like this, up the rosemary. I think that looks quite pretty. And the key to it is to have lots of little bits, so it's very green on the bottom. Okay, so we'll have another little flower here. I'm just going to pop some, where we're going to pop them down the bottom. Okay, so you don't need too much. You can of course use garlic too if you like garlic. I'm just going to have those growing, little mushrooms growing at the bottom. Okay, like that. And then maybe pop some more thyme up the top here. Okay, and maybe one more large, tuck it underneath, pepper here. So what I would do is just cut that off. Okay, and then I'm going to put some olives up these stems on both sides. So you get the idea, and you can just be as creative as you want. If you don't want to make a picture, you don't have to. You can just obviously just scatter the fruits and vegetables wherever you want. But I think it looks really lovely, especially if you're going to a picnic and you want to impress your guests. This can all then be sliced up and people can have a bit of whatever they fancy. I'm going to put some of the chilies down in the bottom here. Okay, like that. Put that other olive there. It's a shame to waste it. Okay. So if you've got somebody who doesn't like quite so much the herby part, you've got obviously the pepper and the lemon here. And I think that, okay, looks really nice. And if I was presented with that on bread, I'd be really, really impressed. And certainly if you're thinking about doing hospitality and catering for your year 10 and 11 options, then this makes an absolutely beautiful distinction level side dish. Okay, so I'm going to see you in a minute when the bread is proved, and I'll show you what to do next. So we just have to wait now. Cover this up with a tea towel if you want, or a piece of cling film or tin foil, and then all you need to do is simply transfer it onto your bread. But you've got an hour, so you've got plenty of time to create your design. I'll see you soon. Okay, so you've left your dough now to prove for an hour. I'll show you what the next stage is. Unfortunately, it does mean leaving it again for another 30 to 40 minutes to prove again once you've got it into your tin. So let me move the camera down. Okay, so I've got my bread dough here. You see it. And take off my tea towel, and you can see that it has more than doubled in size, and it's very light and airy. Okay, so I'm going to get my tin. Now, with your tray, if you're not using the baking paper, you need to just brush on some olive oil to your tray, and you can do that just using your fingers, that's absolutely fine, or you can use a pastry brush. If you're using baking paper, there's no need to do that because the bread won't stick to it. So I'm now going to scrape my bread. This is quite handy because it's quite a flexible sheet of plastic that you can just scrape your bread from your tin, and you'll notice that the air starts to come out of it a little bit. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, keeping it the same way up, I'm just going to push this now into all of the corners and stretch it of the tray. Okay, try not to put holes in it. It's a bit like how we make the pizza at school when we stretch it to our tray. Okay, and you want it big enough, don't forget, to make a picture. So stretch it from the middle. If you do feel like, see that you've got a hole like this, just bend it over and just patch it. But try and sort of make it even. And we're going to let this prove again so it rises up again. Got a little hole there, so I'll just patch that again. Okay, and you want to try and make it even across the tray. You do need to be quite rough with it because it does spring back. Okay, got quite a thin bit of bread there, so I'm just going to try and manoeuvre it. Okay, to make it a bit thicker and fold it over. There we are. It's been quite obstinate. There we are. Okay, and I'm just going to leave that to prove again for about 30 to 40 minutes. So put your tea towel back on. You can put your oven on at this stage, okay, and I believe your oven goes on at 180 degrees. Let me just go and check that with my recipe. Now, I'm glad I checked, it's 220, so put your oven on at 220 degrees, and that's your main oven. You want to cook it in the centre as well. Okay, so I need my oven. Where's my oven gone? There we go. Okay, 220, so I've not had this cook along, as I've mentioned. So pop it up to 220, and it's going to take quite a while to heat up to that temperature. So you can leave this to prove, and then I'll see you in a minute, well, 35 minutes to 40 minutes, when the bread's proved. Okay, so our bread is now proved, and it's time now to put your toppings on. So you need to mix a little bit of olive oil and water together with some salt and brush that over your dough. So I'll move the camera down, show you how to do that, and then we'll transfer our picture onto the bread dough. Okay, so hopefully you can see my tray. So what I've got here, I've just put one tablespoon, that's your big spoon, okay, of water into this cup. And I'm now going to transfer from my olive oil cup 1.5 tablespoons into the water. So I've got 1 and then 1/2. Okay. And into that, I'm also going to put some salt. Now, if you've got the flaky salt or the Himalayan salt, fantastic. If you haven't, well, just pop some regular salt in there, just to give it a bit of a flavour on top of the bread dough. Right. So here's your focaccia. What we're going to do is we're just going to press our fingers into it to make some little holes, and that's where the olive oil will sit, and it will give the bread the texture. Okay, now then, you've got to spread your olive oil onto your bread, so you can just mix it with your fingers, or you can use your pastry brush like this. Okay, so because I've got a pastry brush, I'm just going to use that, and I'm just going to brush this all over, letting it fall into those little dimples that we've made with our fingers. Okay. Now, if you didn't want to decorate your bread, you could just do this and then pop maybe some chili flakes or some salt, pepper, whatever you've got to hand, herbs, dried herbs, onto this bread, and then you can pop it in the oven to bake. But of course, we are going to transfer our picture. So let me see if I can do this. I'm going to put my bread, actually I'll put my bread there so you can see what I'm doing. And I've got my board with my lovely vegetable picture that I did earlier. Now, my little girl who's 9, very artistic, has had a look at this, and she's told me I needed to chop my peppers and move the onions around a little bit. So it does look slightly different from when we last saw it. But I'm going to start transferring now. You need to push these into the dough, okay, like this. Okay, as you go along. So you get the idea. Okay. And I'm not going to let you have you watch me do this again, because it will take me a little time to transfer everything across. What I'm going to do is I'll just turn off the video now, and then I'll see you once I've transferred the picture onto the bread. Okay, so my picture's now on my bread. I did decide whilst I was putting it onto the bread, because the bread was a slightly different size, to cut my tomatoes in half. So this is where you can make any adjustments. So we have this now. This needs to now go in the oven for 20 minutes. If you feel it's getting a little too brown on the top, then just put some baking paper over the top just to protect it while it cooks. But what you actually want to make sure is that the bread is cooked thoroughly all the way through. So if you feel yours needs a few more minutes longer, then keep it in the oven. Okay, so here's the results before cooking. So, whoops, hope yours looks absolutely lovely. I'm sure it will. I'm so looking forward to seeing these pictures. And we're going to pop that in the oven now, and I will show you the final picture at the end. So I hope you really enjoyed getting creative this week. And as I say, please send all your photos to cookery@5acreshighschool.co.uk. And at the end of term, when we do eventually come back to school in September, I'm really looking forward to creating a display outside the food room with all of these images. So please send me everything you cook throughout the summer holidays as well. Okay, I'll see you soon.